Okay, so now we can start. And I'm sorry I sent out the message so late. I thought about it very early and then I thought about it again very late. So that's what happened. I'm sorry. Um, so we're in Perik Kuf Yates, we're on the letter Mem. And the Gemara tells us about the letter Mem that it represents the word Ma'amar, a Maimar. Which we would translate as a pronouncement or a saying. And the Gemara says that this represents the 10 mamarim with which the world was created. So Hashem said 10 things, and that's how the world was created. Let there be light, let their waters separate, right, etc. So that the Gemara continues and says, this means that the letter Mem represents creation. Other commentaries go further with this idea, and they say that Mem, which is the gematria, the value of 40, is the amount of days that it takes for an embryo to become considered the beginning of a fetus. In other words, in the first 40 days, the person is hardly considered pregnant. I think in halacha, not at all. And there's they're not male or female. And only after 40 days, there's a baby, okay, a fetus. And so the creation of a being, of a human, is also a kind of a creation. And so once again, Mem represents creation. We know also that the Yidden spent 40 years in the desert after they came out of Egypt. And it was during those 40 years that they became a nation. So again, Mem representing 40, the creation, of the Jewish people. We know that Noach's flood, which purified the world, also took 40 days, 40 days and 40 nights of rain. And so again, the creation or the recreation of the world and making it pure is 40, which is the concept of creation. And finally, we know that Moshe Rabbeinu spent 40 days in heaven receiving the Torah, learning the Torah, which was the creation of us as human beings and as a Jewish nation and the purpose of the entire world. So altogether, Mem represents creation and most specifically the creation of us. And these 8 verses on the letter Mem are going to tell us how much David HaMelech loved Torah and how much we should love Torah as well. And so he begins with quite a well-known pasuk, Ma ahavti Torasecha, how much do I love your Torah? Kol hayom hi sichasi. All day it's my conversation. I talk about it. And immediately, almost all the commentaries say, what does it mean? I talk about it all day. Is the concept of not becoming bored with it. When we generally first get something, first learn something, first be involved with something, it's very exciting right at the beginning. And then it tends to get boring. And David HaMelech says, no. He says, Kol hayom yisichasi. All the day, or all my days, I'm involved with Torah and I love it. I never ever get bored with it. And the commentaries point out to us that the Rosh Tevus, the first letters of the first 3 words, Ma, which is a Mem, Ahavti, the Aleph, and Teirasecha, the Taf. Those letters, when we shift them around a bit, we get the word Emes, truth. And David HaMelech is explaining to us in this riddle way. I love Torah so much because when I involve myself with Torah, I see absolute truth, complete truth and emes. The Meiri points out that the word ma is interesting in that it could explain, minimize something, and it can maximize something. What do I mean by that? Ma means what? So when you look at something that doesn't impress you, you want to minimize it, You say, what's that? Right? What is that? You don't have any, it's nothing amazing or great. And on the other hand, ma can be something that's so big. We say, what is that? Right? Like, wow. So he says that we have to realize over here and understand completely that David HaMelech is using this word ma ahavti Torah, to speak about the greatness of Torah. Like, wow, Torah is huge. And he says, Kol hayom hisichasi, all day it's my conversation. And immediately the commentaries point out a fact that we probably all know for ourselves, that not only he doesn't get bored from Torah, but when somebody is obsessed with something, they talk about it continuously. And they tell the same stories over and over, and they speak about the same thing more and more. And this is a sign of like absolutely being obsessed, controlled by, thinking about all the time. And this is what David HaMelech says. That's how I feel with Torah. It's in my head all the time. It's all I want to speak about, right? It's my speech. That's what I want to talk about all the time. And this is actually a mitzvah from the Torah, which we say in Shema. The Dibar Torah. We've got to speak about Torah in when you lie down in your bed, when you wake up in the morning, when you're on the way, when you're home. So this is what David HaMelech is saying. That is okay how I feel about Torah. The word sicha, which we've translated over here as to speak, sicha also means to daven. We know that from the story of Yitzchak, waiting out in the field for Eliezer to come back with his future wife. And the Torah says he went out lasuach basadeh, to talk in the field. And from there we learn that Yitzchak composed the mincha prayer. Um, and um, and so sicha, meaning davening, David HaMelech is saying that a person should know that even when they're learning Torah, that's also a time of davening. It's also a time of turning to Hashem. So that it's not only when we're involved in formal tefillah, it's not only when we're involved in informal tefillah, but even when we're involved in doing something which we might think is a shir, or just picking up a chumash and learning, that we are involved. This is also a method of tefillah, of davening. And so David HaMelech is saying, like, imagine this, he's the king, and he's busy with all kinds of things, but he's obsessed with talking about Torah, he's obsessed with learning about learning Torah, and this means that he is spending all day turning to Hashem in prayer. And he says, "Ma'oivai techakmeini mitzvosecha." From my enemies, I become clever because of your mitzvahs. Ki la'olam hili, because they are always with me. And so most of the commentaries explain that David here is talking about his biggest enemies. This was Doeg and Achitophel. And Doeg and Achitophel were very, very big Talmidei Chachamim. They learned Torah, they knew Torah, they were very, very clever, learned people. And David says, how come I'm cleverer than them? From my enemies, I'm more clever, is what he is saying. And the commentaries explain over there that the way to get clever is to learn in order to connect with Hashem. Doeg and Achitophel learned in order to get clever, and he, David HaMelech, he learned in order to connect with Hashem. And when a person learns in order to connect with Hashem, this is what's going to make them cleverer than all the clever people around them. A little bit deeper on Ma'oivai techakmeini, he says, Ma'oivai, from my enemies, techakmeini, I became clever. Say the commentaries, this means that as a result of my enemies, okay, I became clever. In other words, my enemies tried to make me stupid. Okay, my enemies tried to spoil my faith in Hashem. My enemies tried to break my relationship with Hashem. My enemies tried to turn me against Hashem. They try to tear me away from Torah and emunah and faith. But as a result of watching what they were trying to do to me, I became cleverer. I became cleverer than them. Um, Commentaries continue and say that David was saying over here that he loves Torah so much that he was prepared to learn from anyone, even someone who hated him. So he even considered Doeg and Achitophel his teachers. He learned from them. Anything that they knew that he didn't know, he accepted them as his teachers. And the commentaries also point out that one of the things that David HaMelech did was that he listened to everyone who spoke to him. And I stress the word listened. It says that David would stop and listen to what people were telling him, because no matter who they were, he had this understanding that you can learn from anyone. There's something that every single person can teach you. Yeah. And then the Kedushas Levi adds, and he says, this is not talking just about David's physical enemies, but our biggest enemy is the Yetzer Hara. And he says that the only way that we can win over our Yetzer Haras is by learning Torah. If a person is just being faced with their Yetzer Hara, it's almost impossible for us on our own to deal with that, like to outsmart the Yetzer Hara. And what can make us clever enough, make us clever enough to beat the Yetzer Hara, is it's from learning your Torah. David HaMelech also says, Ki la'olam hili, it's always with me. And David says, I never used any other method of of getting clever for anything, ever. So it's like such a controversial subject that it's lucky everybody's been muted, but there is the whole concept, different schools of thought, like, should we be learning secular? Should we be learning degrees? Should we be getting degrees? Should we, here, we live in 2025 in the big world, and we can't just rely on Torah. And actually, if a person could just rely on Torah, if a person was great enough for that, they would do better, and they could get everything that you can get anywhere else from Torah itself. And I give you just a silly example. One of the girls from my class was getting married. She was engaged to a boy. She was one of the first of our class to get engaged, and she was marrying a boy who never did any secular studies, and this really bothered me. I said, Michal, how can you, who has a matric and you've got other qualifications, how can you marry someone who never got educated? And she said to me, she actually asked him the same question when they were going out, and she said, I don't know how this works. If I know stuff that you don't know. So he said to her, what do you know that I don't know? So she says she'll never understand why she said this, but she said, like, for example, I learned Pythagoras' theory. You don't even know what I'm talking about when I say Pythagoras' theory. I hope you all realize that's very important to know Pythagoras' theory. Anyway, so he asked her, what is it? And she started explaining to him how with this formula, you can figure out the slant of something. You can figure out how long So he looked at her and he said, of course I know how to do that. And he showed her. She says, how did you know how to do that? He said, well, I learned the laws of building the Beis HaMikdash, and they had all the ramps going up to the various furniture. So is that just another name for Pythagoras' theory? And even though that's a small example, if a person learns Torah properly, they can learn everything they need to know. It's written even that the Rambam learned medicine from Torah through, like, he didn't have to go to med school. So most of us are not up to that yet, but we have to know that Torah contains everything. Torah has everything. It contains everything. And if we were up to that level, we would be able to get everything directly from the Torah without going anywhere else. And that's what David HaMelech says about himself. He says, Ki la'olam hili. This was everything for me. that study, like studying of Torah, gave me everything that I know. We go on to Pasuk Tzadik Tes, and he says, "Mikol malamdai hiskalti." I learned from all my teachers, ki edei secha sichali, because I talked about your practices. So, what is this concept? Mikol Melamdai Hiskalti. I gained wisdom from all of my teachers, and probably familiar with the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says, Ben Zoma asked or said, Eza hu chacham, who is really wise, halomed mikol adam, somebody who is able to learn from every man, from every single person. And so understanding this at a slightly deeper level, every single person who we encounter and every single thing that we encounter should be our teachers, because we should be learning from every encounter. We should be learning from every person, even if we don't think they're great. There's something in the fact that we met them today. There's something in what they say to us that should change us, who we are. And every single thing that we go through should make us, if we allow it, a change and understanding and learning. It says about David HaMelech that he stood up for his teacher. Remember, he was the king. And then the commentaries explain that he learned one fact from that teacher, and yet he called him my teacher, and he stood up for him. The Alshich comments similar to what we just said earlier, that David HaMelech made an effort to listen to every person, and says that not only he was listening to see what he could learn from them, but when you listen to somebody properly, this is a kindness. People have what they want to share, what they want to say, and we have the job to give them that, to listen to them. I remember we had a youth director here who everybody loved, and I asked my children one day, why does everyone love him? And my one daughter said to me, because he looks at us and listens when we talk to him. And this is such a strong comment for all of us. From all the way back from David HaMelech, listen to what people say, hear what they're saying, and listen to their opinions. And he continues, and he says, this is Pasuk Kuf, Mizkenim Esbainan, from the elders I got insight, Kifikudecha Natsarti, because I carried out your instructions, your mitzvahs. So the Radak right away says this is a repetition of the Pasuk before, and the Radak says that when you want someone to really get what you're saying, you have to repeat it. And it doesn't help to repeat it in exactly the same words. So in the pasuk before, he used the words "Mikol malamdai hiskalti," I learned from everyone. And this pasuk, he says "Miskeinim esbainan," I learned from elders. Not everyone agrees with the Radak, because it's like, that's all very well if you're a teacher or you're a rabbi giving a sermon or whatever like that. But in the Torah, in the Tehilim, it has to repeat it so that we get it. And so they explain the words miskeinim and what is the difference between my teachers and the elders, and explains a few different ways. So zkeinim, which we translate as the elders, so it says that this comes from the words ze kana chachma. This person is wise. Doesn't necessarily mean an old person. It means a wise person. So he says, Mizkenim es bainon. I learned from the elders. In other words, I learned from wise people. It doesn't matter their age. Doesn't matter if they're older or they're young. They're wise, and therefore I'm ready to learn from them. And most of the commentaries point out, he says, Mizkenim es bainon, from elders I've learned. From, as in, I'm even wiser than the elders that I've been influenced by. Other commentaries explain to us that Zkeinim, these elders, it's actually talking about the people who teach us Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah, the Torah also of feelings and emotions, the Torah of turning Torah learning into something concrete, something that affects our lives. So, from our teachers, we are supposed to learn facts and what we need to, like the knowledge of Torah. And from the Zkanim, we're supposed to learn how to carry it out, how to feel it, how to pass it on to the next generation. Um, so everybody needs to have teachers, and we also need to have zkanim. Sometimes our teachers are our zkanim. The person who teaches us facts is also teaching us how to do it, how to feel it, how to be it. And sometimes we have to have a specific person who is our zaken, okay, who is our elder, who helps us to be and behave like the way the Torah wants us to. Another explanation for Mizkanim Esbainon from the elders, I've learned, I've got an insight, and so the commentary is that in most religions, as you become older, you become more useless. Most cultures, I shouldn't say religion, you become more useless. I remember we were standing and talking to someone who was a dentist who retired, and he told us that he wanted to now get a job advising dentists. And he went from one dentist to another, and nobody wanted to hear what he had to say. And he said to my husband, "You're so lucky you're a rabbi, because in the Torah world, the older you get, the more experienced you are, the more you've learned, and then the more you're respected. But in the secular culture, the older you get, the more you are dismissed." And this is what David HaMelech is telling us. It's giving us the instruction. Doesn't matter which world you are in. Mizkanim esbainen. You have to learn from people who are older than you. You have to learn from people who have more experience than you. You have to learn from their experience as well. And he says, "Mikol oirach ra kalisi ragli." From all bad paths, I keep my feet away. And the word kalisi means to restrain myself. So now we're thinking, this is David HaMelech. He needs to restrain himself. He needs to um, keep himself away from bad things. So actually, the commentaries tell us that what does he mean? I restrained myself from bad paths. He prevented himself from any kinds of temptation. It says, say the commentaries on this, that nobody is allowed to put themselves in a place of temptation. We can't say, "I'm strong enough. I can be tempted and I won't do it." We have to. The only way to avoid what we shouldn't do is by not going there. Okay, keeping our feet, so to speak, away from there. And he says, "Why is this? Why am I so careful about keeping myself away from temptation?" He says, "Leman eshmor dvarecha," in order that I can guard, stick to, and keep your words, Hashem. And again, the commentaries explain to us that the way to keep Torah and mitzvahs is by doing it in order to connect with Hashem. As soon as we are doing Torah and mitzvahs just for ourselves, for our own intellectual pursuit, then either it'll be good or it won't be good, right? Some people are lucky and they become great scholars and they learn so much stuff, but it doesn't connect us to Hashem. When does it connect us to Hashem? When we choose to learn Torah, to do mitzvahs, because we want a relationship with Hashem. The Radak says like almost the same, but slightly different. The Radak says, when do we keep ourselves away from bad paths? Is mostly because we're afraid of punishments. So we say, "I better not do that, or I'll like land up in hell," or this Hashem might punish me for that. And David HaMelech says, "No, don't serve Hashem out of fear and fear of punishment, but do it like I have done always. Leman eshmor dvarecha, I want to do what you want. I want to do all of this Torah and mitzvahs because that's what you, Hashem, want from me. That's what, and I love you. And because I love you, that's what I want to be doing. Big difference when we listen to Hashem out of love or out of fear. He continues and he says, "Mimishpatecha lo isarti ki ata hiresoni," and I keep your mitzvahs, Hashem, because you're the one who who taught them to me. You're the one who told me to do them. And the commentaries tell us that we have to keep on remembering that the reason that we study Torah and that we keep mitzvahs is because Hashem told us to, and it shouldn't become just a habit. We shouldn't be doing it just mechanically, but we should just be doing the mitzvahs of Hashem, loisarti, not turn away, not turn away from them. Why? Ki ata harisani, because you taught us to do them, and I think this is such an important concept. We often try and sell mitzvahs, and we say, if you do this mitzvah, then this good is going to happen, and if you do this mitzvah, then this good is going to happen, and we try sell them in that way. It says David HaMelech, no, we keep mitzvahs because Hashem told us to keep mitzvahs. That's the bottom line. If all those good things happen, that's a fringe benefit. But the real reason we keep the mitzvahs is because Hashem told us to. And even when we don't understand, we don't appreciate the mitzvah, we don't appreciate what Hashem is doing, we still keep the mitzvahs because you, Hashem, told us to. And the Radak comments on this and he says, a human can never understand what it is that Hashem wants. We are limited. Our brains are limited. Our bodies are limited. The world we live in, we're limited. We have all boundaries and we can't really understand exactly what it is that Hashem wants from us. So why do we keep everything? Because Hashem said so. And can we ever understand why Hashem said so? Why Hashem wants that? So it says that when a person tries to learn and accept what Hashem tells us what to do, then he opens up the gates of understanding for us. And so we start understanding. And what is the first thing that we understand? We understand that we cannot understand everything. And the more we understand, the more we realize that we can't understand so much. And he continues, Pasuk Kuf Gimel, he says, Ma nimletzu lechiki imrasecha midvash lefi. Your sayings, the things you tell me to do, are so sweet in my mouth, more than honey. And this is the concept of Torah is sweet. It's part of our tradition that from when a baby is tiny, its mother sings to it or tells it every single day. Rozenkas mit mandlen is zuckerzest, that raisins and almonds are so sweet, but Torah is even sweeter. And we have lots of other minhagim that we do. We throw sweets at a child the first time it comes into school. We make a child who's of the age of chinuch, most often at their upsherinish, taste the letters of the aleph bays that have been covered in honey. Because what is the message that we're giving to our children and to ourselves? That Torah is sweet, okay, that it's actually sweet and goes not just for little children, but even for adults. In Megillus Rus, it speaks about Boaz, that when he finished the meal, and it says he ate and he drank and he became merry. And some of the commentaries say, what does it mean he became merry? So besides the fact that he was going to learn Torah, it says that Boaz was always careful to eat dessert. Something sweet after the meal. Trouble is if my husband's listening to this because he likes dessert. And says why something sweet after the meal? So we should know that we've finished eating and drinking, and now what's the sweetest thing? The study of Torah. So we put something sweet on our tongues, and then we go and we study Torah. The Medrash Tanchuma points out that most of our body juices are not sweet, right? Like our tears are salty, but the saliva in our mouths is it should be, unless you've got bad teeth, it should be a nice taste, right? Most people are happy with a taste in their in their mouth. And Medrash Tanchuma says, why? Why is the saliva sweet? Because we study Torah with our mouths. The Gemara Yerushalmi tells us that 40 years before the Yidden were landed up in the Babylonian exile, Hashem got people to plant date palms. So when the Jews would come there, there would be date palms. Now imagine that here they are in exile, and what's so important for them? Hashem's made sure that there are sweet dates. Hanging over there for them to eat from, and says it was a reminder to them that even while they're in exile, they're going to learn Torah, and they should actually feel physically, practically, um, the taste of dates, of sweet dates, and say to themselves, Torah is sweet, which gives everybody an excuse after the show to go and have a chocolate. Okay, and um, finishes the mem letters, says Mipikudecha is esbainan. I get insight from your laws. Al kain sanesi kol eirach shaker, and that's why I hate all um, false ways, false directions. And here the commentaries say that most especially David HaMelech is talking about people who would study Torah Shebichtav, the written Torah, and not the Torah Shebal Peh, the oral Torah. We can't study the written Torah without the oral Torah because there's so many things that don't make sense or would cause us to make real halachic mistakes. And so David HaMelech says, I understand why we have an oral Torah, and we have to learn from it. We have to accept it exactly as we accept um, the um, the written Torah. And so these 8 verses, David HaMelech is explaining to us how much he loves Torah, what Torah does for him as a human, and what we need to do to copy that. And that brings us to the end of the mems, which is halfway through this capital now. So there.
Thank you, Rivki.
So pleasure. Have a good Shabbos. And
Thank you, Rivki. Have a good Shabbos.